Good morning.
Good morning.
Everybody fall asleep again on that? Luke chapter 15. We've been doing a little bit different this year, leading up to Easter, looking at some different stories that we take for granted in the New Testament, and seeing ourselves in these stories. We like to pick and choose where we would be, but there's some different places, for lack of a better term. Luke chapter 15, beginning with verse 11. You will know the story very well. We'll read through verse 32. Luke writes for us, "And Jesus said, 'There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of the property that is coming to me." And he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all that he had and took a journey into a far country, and there he squandered his property in reckless living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, but no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread? But I perish here with hunger. I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against you and heaven. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants.' And he arose and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion, and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his slave, 'Bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet, and bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' They began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the field, and when he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing, and he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, 'Your brother has come home, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has received him back safe and sound.' But he was angry and refused to go in. And his father came out and entreated him. But he answered his father, 'Look, these many years I have served you. I have never disobeyed your command, yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. And when this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him.' And he said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found.'" The smartest people on the planet are 12 to 19-year-olds. They know everything. How many of you have raised something that's been between 12 and 19? Okay, am I pretty close? Are they the smartest, at least in their own minds, people on the planet? I'm looking towards the back of the room, towards 2 individuals in particular. They know everything. There's nothing that they don't know. And if you are past the age of 30, you know nothing. You don't even know how to tie your own shoes. They have to do that for you. We have in this parable a man with 2 sons, and the younger son decides he knows better than everybody else, and he demands his inheritance. But there's a problem. You usually don't get an inheritance until somebody dies. So we can go on and on how, he wanted his father to die and all this and get into that. And that's not the issue here. He asks his father, he actually commands his father, "Give me what's coming to me." And the father does it. And so he turns all of the property and the cattle and the sheep into money. He sells them. And not many days later, he leaves. He hits the road. He's got his pockets full of money, You got a 19-year-old that's got money and freedom and is, I was going to say the most dangerous thing on the planet, but, here you go. Absolutely insane. Let me give you a modern-day example. Okay? You all know we spent some time in Kentucky. In Kentucky, there is one sport. Actually, there's two. The second is NASCAR. But the first sport is University of Kentucky basketball. There is nothing else. If you're not a University of Kentucky basketball fan, your life is in danger. Mine was in danger because I am not a UK fan. But that's okay. They have picked up the habit of, they will have 19-year-olds come in, play 1 year, they'll be great, they'll get drafted by an NBA team and make $40 million a year. And now you have a 19-year-old with millions and millions of dollars. Anybody want to write a $40 million check to a 19-year-old? They don't know how to deal with it. This kid hits the road because he's smarter. He goes into a foreign country, and he is just the life of the party. Money buys friends. Where I go to school in Florida, right across from the La Quinta that I stay in, is a Ferrari dealership and a Maserati dealership. It's kind of interesting that it's right across from a La Quinta that there's two of them. And Maserati's now making a four-door, by the way, for families. So you can go spend $190,000 and have a four-door Maserati for the family. So you just figure out how they did that. But one day I was through with class and I thought, I'm just curious. So I walked in and asked the salesman, said, look, don't even come close to having the money, not going to buy one. Just curious. He's like, that's fine, we get asked all the time. And I'm standing next to this beautiful red Ferrari. And I'm like, just curious. He goes, that car you have your hand on? Mm-hmm. $250,000. Hands off. And I asked him, I said, how many of these do you sell? He's like, last year we sold 20. $250,000, I can find something better to spend it on, but be that as it may. And, you spend the money and you show up at the clubs, and when you show up with a $250,000 car, you're automatically popular. This kid shows up, and he is in this foreign country, and he squanders his property with reckless living. In short, he just spends it. He just goes and goes and goes. Does anybody remember the movie with Richard Pryor, Brewster's Millions? I'm the only one that may have seen it. Okay. The whole principle of the movie is he can inherit $300 million or $100 million, but he has to spend $30 million in 30 days and show nothing. He has to have exactly what he had at the beginning at the end. And he can't tell anybody. Now you think about it. You can't acquire anything. You can't tell anybody, and you have to spend $30 million. Be fun to try. I mean, this kid's spending it as quickly as he can because he's smarter than everybody else. Well, it just happens that after his squandered his property and his money with reckless living, that, as usually will happen in these cases, there's a famine. The younger man is blinded by his own lack of experience. He puts nothing back. He spends it all. We listen every year to this growing list of professional athletes and musicians who are broke. They made millions of dollars and now they're broke, and we're supposed to feel sorry for them. Permit me one more sports illustration. Back in the 90s, I remember a baseball player by the name of Mike Greenwell signed a $3 million contract. They interviewed him and asked him, well, what are you going to buy? New truck. Why? Other ones wore out. You going to buy anything else? New pair of boots. Why? Wore out. You're not going to buy anything else? Don't need it. So he bought a new truck and a new pair of boots and saved the rest. Today, he's not on the list of people that are broke. This young man is broke, and now there's a famine. And if you had money, if you put money back, you have something, but he is in need. There's nothing there. He has no friends. He has no family. The friends that were there were because he was spending money. He was smarter than everybody else. He knew how to do this. Now, the one smart thing we have, at least in this first section, is he went out and at least he got a job. I love listening to people, there are no jobs. McDonald's right up here on the corner says now hiring. You may not like it, but there's jobs. Okay? But he went out and got a job, and he's feeding pigs. Here's a good Jewish boy that's feeding pigs. Not the most brilliant and best place on the planet for him to be. It's amazing. Very few people identify themselves with the prodigal son or the young man at this point in the story. We don't want to be, and we don't want to admit that there's been times in our lives, and maybe more frequently and sooner rather than later, that we thought we knew how to do everything, and the more and the harder we tried, the more it fell apart. The more we tried to hold it together, the more it broke. I watched my poor son try to put together a Lego set he got for Christmas, and the boy is an engineering mastermind. He better be, so Daddy can retire. And the poor, I mean, he's got headphones on, so I can talk about him, and so I go, oh, there went the headphones. I mean, he worked on that ship. He worked on that spaceship. You worked on that Lego ship. I mean, the kid worked hard, and he got it all together, all right, and it just it wasn't designed well, and it fell apart. So he put it together again, and it fell apart. It wasn't for lack of trying. It was not for lack of trying. Right? The young man tried to know what he was doing, and he didn't. And no one helped him out. Verse 17. Thoughts of thousands of people are vividly painted in these words. But when he came to himself, they say that when you jump out of an airplane in the United States military and your parachute doesn't open and your reserve does not open, it's not the initial hit that kills you. You bounce. It's the second that kills you, because the first one breaks all your bones, and the second one, you can just figure it out. You bounce. There are people who survive bouncing, but he bounced. He came to himself. He realized that he was in a position that he could not get to. Now we're getting to a place where we may recognize ourselves. What ruins so many people's souls is simply this: they never think at all. We don't think. He's sitting here feeding pigs, starving to death, and all of a sudden it hits him. He's come to himself. He realizes, how many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, and yet I'm dying here of hunger? This is dumb. All right, I've got a job somewhere. I mean, he may not be happy with me, but I've at least got a job somewhere that I can go and get. And I'm starving, so I will go back to my father, and I will say, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. Here is absolute repentance. He realized what he did, his wrong. He wanted to make it right, and he had come to himself and to his senses, and he had used the brain that was in his head. Now the teenager's starting to be a little wiser. And so, he goes back to his father. And while he was a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion on him and ran. Landowners don't run. Millionaires don't run. A desperate father who had lost a child runs. And he embraced him and kissed him. He didn't smack him upside the head and said, what were you thinking? He was more concerned that his son who had left had come back. Now, we like this part of it. We'll identify here because, hey, we've messed up. God loves us, all of this, and that's wonderful. But yet we didn't want to be the one who had totally messed this up. We don't like that side of the story. We like this part. But you don't get to this part without getting to the first part. To understanding that we've messed it all up. He comes and the son begins to say, Father, I've sinned against you and before heaven. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. And the father shuts him down immediately. And he says to his slaves, quickly, bring the best robe and put a ring on his finger and shoes on his feet. Dress him as my child, as an heir. Restore to him the position that is his by right. We're really starting to like this now. But the young man who has been restored by right isn't the same young man that took all of his father's possessions, or half of his father's possessions, and went and wasted them because he wanted to, because he thought he knew better. Father says, you know what? It's irrelevant. You're my child. And go and bring the fattened calf and let us eat and celebrate. He was a Baptist. Let's have a party. See, we're all over the Bible. We're going to have barbecue. Why? It's right there. Kill the fattened calf and let's have a party. Okay? Let me ask you something. When that person has sinned against you in such a horrid way that you don't want to see them anymore, and they come back and say, I've sinned against you in heaven, are you willing to say, bring the best that we have and let's celebrate because that person has returned? So we've got the young man who knew no better. We've got the young man, same young man who knew better and came to himself and repented. We have a father who was so concerned about his son that he loved him regardless. And now we have a father that is so thrilled that he's willing to celebrate the fact that his son has come back. For his son who was dead is alive again. He was lost and he is found. And so they began to celebrate. They began to enjoy being together again. Now the older son, if you look at the painting of the prodigal son, you see the older son and he's standing here and he looks like this. He's just the most sour-faced individual on the planet. He comes in, he's been out working all day long. He's been out in the field and he hears the party and he calls one of the servants and they say, you know, your brother has come home, and that just thrills him to death that, you know, this, you know, little runt who's taken half of what was his father's has come back, and now we have to deal with this kid. It's come back. And it says that he was angry and refused to go in, and his father came out and entreated him to come in. And the son, the older son, says, look, don't you understand who this kid is? He's wasted everything that you've worked for. He's useless. You laid down the rules and said, this is how we're to live, and he did everything just the opposite. He took off. He spent your money on wine and food and prostitutes and the whole 9 yards. How in the world can you bring this kid back? Are you joking? He's a good Pharisee. Here are the rules. Here's how you're supposed to live. He broke them. Throw him out the door. And on top of that, I've done everything you've asked me to do for all of these years, and you haven't even given me a goat. Shane, we need a sheep. This guy needs one. We'll hook him up, okay? But verse 30. You got to love verse 30, because this is the way, as parents, we even do this. And don't you say you haven't, because everybody who's a parent in the room has done this. But when this son of yours, it's amazing. When they do good, they're Courtney's. When they do something bad, they're mine. I don't know how that works. You know, she's back there. She ignored that one, so that's good.
I heard it.
Did you ignore that one? She's smiling. That's not a good thing on that one. This son of yours, not my brother, this other son, this other thing that you call a child has come back, and he's devoured everything that you've had, and you've done all of this. And the father says, yes, everything that's left that I have is yours. All right? It's irrelevant. He has nothing. He has absolutely nothing on the planet except what you may give. And I wouldn't hold my breath on that one. Legalism's terrible. Legalism is saying I'd rather live with rules than take a chance of living in a relationship with God, because living in a relationship with God can be scary. He may ask me to do things that are hard. He may ask me to live with those who come back after they've wasted all the money and time and efforts. But it's fitting to celebrate and be glad, for your brother was dead and he's alive. He's lost and he's found. We want to know where we are in all of these stories. Well, folks, we've been in all of the places. We've been the young ones who wanted to go out and do our own thing and be on our own. We wanted to go out and spend the money and go to school and get married and start a family and do all of this stuff and have fun. And we've fallen flat on our faces. We've been in the position of the father, whether age or children or whatever, that says, oh, you know what, I will do what you want because I love you, and sometimes you got to let people fall flat on their face before they figure it out. We've been the son who's there feeding pigs because there's absolutely nothing else he can do, that comes to his senses and says, look, this is ridiculous. Forgive me, I don't know any other way to put this. How much dumber can I get? I'm sitting here in a pig pen, and yet there's hope out here, and I won't do what's necessary. And so he gets up and goes to his father, not sure of what's going to happen. Surely not expecting his father to run down the road to find him and to dress him as the heir apparent of all that he has. We've been in that position wondering why and how. And God said, don't worry about it. You are. This is what you are. This is who you are. We've been in the position of the older son that's looked at him and said, you have got to be joking. Don't you know what this one has done? Yep, and I know what you've done too. You may call him my son, but he's your brother. You may say, look what he's done, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Yes, but you've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, if we want to start keeping track. We've been everywhere in this story. This little mini-series has been entitled The Mystery of Mercy, because mercy is a mystery, because we don't deserve it. Nobody in this story deserved the mercy. The older son sure didn't, because he'd rather be a legalist. It's all about the rules. It's all about the law. The younger son was all about the party and all about the fun. And at least he figured it out. We like to read the stories, and we like to read this one in particular. The question becomes, have you found yourself here? It may not be in the exact place that you wanted to find yourself. You may not be in the place that you wanted to find yourself right now. You may not have been in the place that you wanted to find yourself last week or the week before. But here's the thing, God finds you where you are. And He runs to you. And He treats you as the heir apparent, as the one that He has been looking for, that He has been longing for. And when the one comes and says, well, don't you know? Yes, I know, and I don't care. They're mine. They belong to me. It's a mystery. But I'm good with it. There's something that in theology you have to become very good with. You have to become okay with. Because there's no options. You have to become okay with, I don't know. I probably wouldn't have let the younger one back on the ranch, to be quite honest. He probably would have been feeding pigs on my ranch. I probably would have had him doing the same job, to be quite honest. I mean, anybody out here going to tell me that thought wouldn't have crossed your mind? That you wouldn't have been like the older brother thinking, yeah, let this boy back and you better lock everything up. But fortunately, grace doesn't work like that. Grace says, you know what? You messed up. Grace says you came to your senses. Grace brought him to his senses. Grace says you've been in every position in this story that you can imagine. So the next time that you run into somebody who sinned against you, remember where you've been. We are sadly in an election cycle, and we listen to people all over the place. Oh, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and I want to be this, and I want to be that, and, you know. I'm really missing the Toys R Us commercials, you know. I want to be a Toys R Us kid because it makes more sense than all of this. I listened to a video the other night, and I actually had Courtney listen to it, and bless her heart, she did. Living with a pastor, living with somebody who does theology can be painful at times. And Courtney can smile and shake her head yes all the time because she has to listen to all of this. She knows more 15th and 16th century theology than any human being should probably know. but listen to a pastor, and you would know his name, and I will not repeat it, but as he preached at his church and said that if you don't go to a big church, you're selfish. You don't care about your kids, you're selfish, because it's better for your kids to go to a big church. I'm going to be honest, he would have been feeding the pigs on my ranch if he'd have been within inches or miles. But that's just as wrong as saying you're being selfish, because we don't always get it right. I hear stories of people who've done things that are just absolutely shocking. I hear stories of people who are in prison who have done absolutely horrid things. But God has done equally amazing things. I see people do things that just because somebody needed it. I see people who